Welcome. It's our third and penultimate roundup of the season. We're going to be talking about Milan, which is perhaps not the most exciting city, but I have a very exciting panel who will hopefully pull everything good that we can out of Milan. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves to kick things off.
Good morning, I'm Mimma Viglezio and I'm a consultant.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Gonsalves and I'm the assistant fashion editor of The Independent.
I'm Charlie Byrne, I'm a fashion writer for The Times.
I'm Harriet Walker and I'm news editor at Never Underdressed.
God, it's an amazing panel. When you hear you all introduce yourself, I'm like, yes, this is great. I want to start with quite a simple question. What was the standout show from Milan? I know everyone's going to want to say Prada, so I'm going to say, what was the standout show that wasn't Prada?
Okay. I wanted to start saying, thank God for Prada.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
is the title for Milan, but
That
I
might
would say probably Fendi.
Yeah, I really liked Fendi.
What was so great about there's a lot of buzz and hype about Fendi at the moment, both the women's and the men's. Why is it so exciting?
I think it was just very light and feminine and modern, and after last season where this is where it's just fur. I mean, it was fur, it's intarsia fur, it's, you know, but it's so beautiful and it doesn't look like fur and it's just elegant and ladylike and clean, I think.
I think it's also the level of workmanship there is incredible.
Yeah.
We had a
quality.
Risi and it's fur, shaved fur on like the thinnest gossamer tulle, like totally sheer. You can't see how it's attached. It really is incredible. It felt like couture. It felt like it had the man hours in there.
Yeah.
I'm quite amazed by the work they're doing at Fendi because it's always been fur or leather and we never really, I mean, their ready-to-wear was not relevant for many years and it's becoming more and more, and I know they've had a lot of changes in the design team and I think Charlotte Stockdale is doing a very good job and I think it's fantastic, exactly, the ability they have, probably thanks to the fur, to do workmanship in everything and the money they have to create amazing samples and stuff. It's very beautiful.
Do we think
I
it
think it
has
was a standout show.
Yeah. Do we think it has a fashion currency now, aside from being sort of exciting for the luxury and for the fur and for the technique?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's most interesting about this collection anyway is, and previous ones, but this one particularly, is that you don't feel that this is a fur house crowbarring in fur because that's their sort of forte. It feels very much like clothes that are built around the idea of trying to find new ways to use that material rather than saying this has to be in there. It feels like a very natural progression.
Yeah, it feels like a natural technique applied to the collection.
Launched a trend for
Yeah.
that.
Charlie, we've talked about Fendi, what was your standout show other than Prada?
Purely, perhaps for atmosphere, Moschino was just fun.
Yeah.
You know, just on a level of going to an event, it was just fantastic. And to see the press standing up, dancing, you know, it was a party beyond the collection.
I thought Moschino was amazing, but one thing I wanted to sort of ask you all about was seeing, you know, Pat Cleveland have such an amazing time on the runway, seeing those old models. Did it not make us all feel a little bit nostalgic and think like how boring a show is now?
Yeah.
Completely.
I thought one of the sad things about it was that it was an amazing show and it's a real spectacle, but people didn't necessarily treat it as anything more than a show because it was still, as they were sort of doing their final whip round, people were starting to leave and kind of run out, like the way they do at any sort of normal show, desperate to get to the next one. Whereas this felt, as you say, like a big party, this kind of huge event. I don't know whether people treated it as such.
I think one thing was that the archive pieces, the amazing supermodels, overshadowed the spring collection.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Which is quite sad because obviously a lot of work went into it, and you know that's what they're saying is their agenda for the next season. But I mean, it's impossible when you have these personalities. And the way they were kind of working the catwalk and milking the cameras, it was just amazing to see. And I mean, for me, that's kind of growing up what fashion was about. It was about those personalities.
It's a choice they made. They wanted to mark the anniversary probably more than the collection itself, and they could not know that would happen.
Oh no, of course.
I thought it was quite spectacular. I guess you all were there because you're editors. I wasn't, so I saw it online, but it was you could feel the atmosphere by
the
watching
pictures.
it, so.
It was a great strategy as well, because I think, as you say, we sort of grew up with, you know, those amazing campaigns, the sort of Karl Marx take off, that one was brilliant, and then you sort of read about the moo boxes on the seats at shows, but that has sort of, I don't know whether it's been forgotten, but those are the sort of standout Moschino moments, and so it's nice to have them all in one place for perhaps a new audience that doesn't remember them. A sort of new, young, fun pop art culture.
It's interesting that you said
I was there when it started.
Did it make you miss it?
No, not at all. I mean, I was there. I was alive, and I grown up enough to know what was going on. And my first big memory of Moschino is Cheap and Chic. And I remember I was living in Geneva at the time, and everybody was going around with T-shirts or something that was saying that was the thing to have. And it's a good memory, and this thing brought it back, brought it all back. And I must say that I had forgotten about Moschino a little bit. I didn't think, maybe wrongly enough, that Moschino was, to me, it wasn't very relevant in the past few years, and this thing has brought it back completely. And I even went to see the store here, to see the collection, and to say, what are they actually doing now? So maybe that was a good strategy, as you said.
Definitely.
You just had to sit up and notice. It just grabbed your attention right back to the label.
It was fantastic.
I think it's interesting as well, and I think it's perhaps more of a Milan thing, but the idea that a heritage doesn't have to be sort of 150 years worth of clothes or of a kind of atelier or fusty museum pieces. That actually a heritage can be born in Studio 54, and that's totally fine. And actually people are really interested in that kind of thing at the moment, because it is again that kind of behind closed doors sense of fashion that's sort of coming through on social media a bit as well. It was nice to sort of have that, especially the film they played at the beginning. Nice to have that sort of view into Moschino.
Tell us a bit about the film, because obviously for our viewers.
Oh, it was a very brief thing that was sort of a kind of like biographical, let's remember how it was 30 years and sort of black and white shots. And
there's a lot of footage of Franco, obviously.
Didn't he die even before the 10th anniversary?
I thought he did.
I thought he did the 10th.
Or just. He died, he died.
I think he died like 19 years ago.
Exactly.
So just after.
He just did the 10th.
I think so.
I'm interested about this idea of archives, because I think you're right. We've talked about kind of Fendi as a fair house, and you often with Milan it's this idea of leather houses. And I'd like to pick up on it and just to talk a little bit more about Moschino and this idea of sort of how much fashion has changed in such a short period of time. Because as you say, it's a 30-year anniversary, and seeing those models, even just dress in the way they would dress, like Pat Cleveland was wearing an outfit. Alex Fury told me yesterday that she wore in the first ever show she wore in, exactly. And to see models behave like that, does it show just how quickly fashion changes, even in 30 years, how different it is? Because catwalk shows are nothing like this anymore, are they? So clinical.
Apart from Gautier.
I think which I love.
Sorry, what did you say?
I just absolutely adore Gautier. I got into a talk with Alex about that last time. He was very dismissive. I had a great time. But I don't know whether it shows how quickly fashion changes, because actually, you can tell that these are sort of retro influenced pieces, but they wouldn't look that out of place in a store or on a kind of modern catwalk for proper. I think what you see changes is the mode of presentation and the fact that it doesn't necessarily feel like it's fun anymore. It's very straight-faced in most cases. It's very business-like, which is not, that's not a problem, but it's a mode of presentation that has evolved perhaps.
And actually you could tell that there were some members in the sort of, depended where you were sitting, but there were some members of the press who just weren't quite comfortable with the idea of standing up and dancing and getting your phone out, and there were some people really going for it, and there were some people who I think were quite stunned and didn't quite know how to get into that atmosphere, because they're so used to sitting there and very seriously looking at the clothes, taking it very,
Do you think people
drinking it in.
They want an idea of a separation, they don't want the show to involve them, and when the show becomes an experience for everyone, I feel like we've moved away from that idea of being immersed in the fashion. It's become very kind of object and subject, we look and we dissect rather than being kind of like we are moved. People often talk about the death of narrative.
But I think people are really up for that. Like, I think as soon as if you look at this show, but it's true. As soon as there's this sort of element of it doesn't even have to be fun. It's just the idea that you're involved in an event and you're participating in it. People really go mad for it. And now, obviously, I can't think of any examples. But the McQueen shows way back when. I really can't think of any other examples. But I think, exactly. When you walk in and there's the sets, people lap it up.
As you said before, are a very commercial thing. Let me see your collection. Let me see what I'm going to buy, or write about and let's get over, you know, to the next car and taxi.
So is there not a place for both?
Well, I think it's a pity, but
I do too.
But you know, there are many shows as well, and people have many shows and many appointments, and it's very difficult to have fun. You're just exhausted.
Do you guys find that when you're there, you want to be able to have fun, but you're so conscious of, you know, making sure that you've pleased all the advertisers that you need to see, making sure that you're kind of covering enough?
Yeah, I think it's funny. People who are my friends that don't work in fashion, they're like, oh wow, you know, you're going to Paris,
Lucky
have
you.
a great time. And it's like, no,
Have
you
a
don't
holiday.
understand.
Yeah.
It's like this, and you know, it's non-stop. You're going from showroom to show and back and forth, and you kind of need a spectacle to make it, to, you know, jar you and wake you up and think, wow, that was great. Because so often, you know, you're just like, oh, it's a beautiful venue, oh, there's some clothes, oh, it's over. And, you know, you need a bit of, well, I personally like a bit of theatricality to kind
Frivolity
of,
as well.
exactly, because otherwise you might as well be watching it on a live stream, because, you know, often you're not close enough to see the clothes that well. And I think it's actually really interesting how, since the whole of fashion weeks have become much more, you know, democratic and open to the public, and everything's, you know, available to see everywhere, they've become so much more dry, perhaps. You would expect it to
and it should be
the other way. It should be much more of a
Well
spectacle.
said. It should be the opposite, because now it's on every, you know, computer screen. It's in squares in the world, and I was thinking about, I know we're talking about Milan, but about Burberry, you know, it was a lovely show. It was a normal, lovely show. But then you show it on like how many cities in the world, and it's the same thing you've done again and again.
Do you think that's because to us the fashion show is so sort of normal? We're so used to seeing it, as you implied there, Rebecca. You know, we see so many, we don't find it exciting. But do you think for people that do tune into the Burberry stream, just seeing a fashion show, even if it is just models going up and down a catwalk, that in itself is theatre.
I mean, there is something true about that. But I also think that they should use the platform for
doing
something different, because we all know that actually the buy is not done there. You know what I mean? That gives you a feel of the season, but then people go to the showroom to buy.
I'm not sure there's a correlation between the sort of advent of live streaming and the democratization of you know, access to the shows, and them becoming sort of more pared back. I think doing those big spectaculars at any point over the, well, it's very expensive, but also at any point over the past 6 or 7 years, it wouldn't have felt right for the mood as well. I really think that sort of scaling back is something that is, it's been reflected in the clothes as well. Things have just got simpler. Not everywhere, obviously. Gautier. But it just wouldn't have felt right to carry on doing those great big numbers. And actually, you know, you see that journey it's sort of indicated most highly perhaps at Dior. What it was under Galliano, what it is under Raf now, and the sort of transition that it took.
But I wouldn't call it simple when it's got like millions of flowers.
No, not at all. But it did go through a phase of just being a catwalk show.
I think that Paris, some shows look like couture. It wasn't that simple. I think it's.
But I think we're coming out of that.
Exactly.
I think we're going back into. I feel like we had that minimalism, that kind of. There was that men's season that everyone talked about, where every collection was just suits, and it felt like that was kind of the tipping point where it was so clear how, not boring, but how safe everything was. Everything from the presentation to the models to the clothes. And maybe we are coming out of that. Maybe this is the kind of gateway for
I hope so. I think
the
it
discussion
should be
is about what is a show still important. I mean, I think it should be probably another panel, but is it still relevant? You know, and that's we could discuss that forever. But especially in Milan, where honestly, when I say thank God for Prada, it's because there's not much new, and there's not much, you know, like inspiring or exciting fashion. Maybe that's why this was a standout. You know?
I want to pick up on this idea from you, because this was actually something that came out of our London discussion yesterday. I thought it was a really interesting point. We talked that another kind of aspect of the sort of economic climate that we've been in, as much as people making clothes that are safer, we also talked about everyone becoming a lot more authentic to their house and true to their house. So Chanel became very Chanel, Dior became very Dior, and I think we see that a lot in Milan anyway. It's a city where everyone kind of does the same thing, but no one's particularly keen on changing. But did you notice that at all this season? People like Gucci, was so.
I thought there was a lot. I thought there was a lot of change. I think it's difficult in Milan because as you say, everyone has this sort of USP, which is separate, I think, to the fact that a lot of people like to ascribe a kind of biography to labels in Milan, you know, such as this is Mrs. Prada's vision, or this is Dolce & Gabbana, and they used coins, so it's obviously about the tax thing, which I don't think was right. Or, you know, Jil Sander's back, this is what she wants to wear. I don't think it's necessarily about that sort of biography, but it is about the signatures of the house.
Let's talk a little bit about Prada now, because I feel like we've eased into Milan.
Let's get over
now
it,
we can. What were our thoughts? Charlie, what did you think of Prada?
It was one of those collections where you look at it and it just makes you smile. And it was as basic as that. And I think Laura wrote the roundup for us, Laura Craig, and she tackled a question that had been highlighted at the Times because of Giles Corran's piece regarding fashion and sort of whether it's, you know, what the point of fashion is, whether it's actually even moral, I think, these days. And Laura's point was that that collection was for women entirely, through and through. It you know, Giles pointed out that a lot of looks at London was sort of too out there to be wearable, and they don't appeal to the opposite sex. But this collection was about it, you know, you could be in love with a man, you could be in love with a woman, it made no difference. You would be dressing for you. You know, your emotions shouldn't be affecting your wardrobe in that way. It's, you know, it's a really personal thing, and it's just fun. You know, just wear what you want to wear and look fantastic doing it.
I think that's a really interesting point, because so much of Milan still, I think it's the only city where you still feel like that does seem to be about dressing to appeal to the opposite sex. You know,
It's sex, definitely.
But Miuccia Prada said backstage afterwards, she said, it's about making, I'm paraphrasing obviously, it's about, you know, giving women a chance to sort of be heard, and if the way to get people to pay attention to women is to get them to look at them, then that's what I'm doing with this.
It's reclaiming that.
And that's really interesting, I think.
Yeah,
that's completely different from saying, look at me, I'm a sex symbol. It's rather look at me and then listen to what I'm saying.
I think that throughout the years, that's what Miuccia's done beautifully and constantly. And what you said about, you know, this shouting about, I want to be noticed, I want to appeal to someone else. It's never been at Prada. And when, you know, like back 10, 15, 20 years ago, they used to say Prada is probably too severe, too... And I always loved it because it's for you. You, if you like Prada, it's because you feel well in it. You feel elegant, beautiful, whatever. And this collection, you know, I discussed it with people that are not in the fashion industry. You know, those people that say, I don't get it, and which I understand.
It's alien,
you know.
isn't it?
And I think it's about then styling in a different way, but it's full of ideas. It's, as you say, it makes you smile.
It's just
full
imagination,
of beautiful,
isn't it?
It's, thank God for Prada.
Are there many designers, because we're talking about it as if it's kind of something that is quite normal, but I feel like it's actually a very rare thing to be able to do well, which is creating garments that are just for the wearer. I think very few design houses, maybe that's the appeal of Celine, it feels like you have this kind of intellectual connection with your clothes, it's something you know, and the viewer who's looking at you doesn't quite know. Same with Jil Sander, who does that really well.
I think it's a thing at Com. You know, Com is all about interacting with what you're putting on, because you can't figure out how to put it on quite a lot of the time. So you have to really learn to understand your clothes, which I think is a really lovely concept.
And how they work.
We've mentioned the kind of idea that she's, you know, a lot of reportage of this collection picked up on the kind of feminist tone of this collection, both in the sort of the murals themselves, but also in that idea of reclaiming a notion of being looked upon and gazed at and interacted with. Did you guys pick up on that? And did you find that quite refreshing to see fashion do something that is making a point but without shouting about it?
I think this kind of is shouting about it. But I think that is the point.
I think it's really bold. It was kind of obvious, I think. It came across instantly as soon as you saw it. They weren't, you know, if you saw that woman walking down the street, you know she doesn't care. She doesn't care what you think.
I don't think this collection whisper. I think this collection shouts.
She's having a great time, and she doesn't care whether you like it or not.
I think another brave, interesting, bold thing in this collection is that it was so immediately sort of in your face. And you notice it immediately. Which sort of subdues the fact that there is so much work gone into each of these pieces. The embellishment, that it's, you know, it's encrusted
when you get up
with
close
beads
to
and
it.
crystals, and the fur is cut beautifully, and the prints are obviously incredible. It's very Prada to sort of do this thing that's very shouty and actually that sort of directs attention away from how incredibly well made these are.
For me, the difference between an interesting designer and the others is that when it's an interesting designer like Miuccia, there's nothing which is taken by someone else's design. There are references from art, from whatever, from history, but it's her, you know, and then many others, without mentioning names, you can always see, you know, they copied a little bit from this, from that, from, you know, from, and this is going to set such a big trend.
Totally
This is going to start a whole new
We talked about this on the Prada
season
panel.
of fashion.
It'll kick off trends, but I love that if you try and copy this, you can imagine this copied on the high street, it would look abominable.
Look
No,
so
yeah,
bad. But
it's not possible, but
I'd love to see the art and fashion students take on it and how they, you know, they layer their pieces and they'll go down and get football socks and cut the feet off, and that will be great. But no, the high street version will be
it's
terrible.
impossible.
But I love that play on bra tops as well. It's almost
brilliant.
absolutely
So
brilliant.
good.
Probably the high street will try to do that in a sad way.
But I think there's also, there are pieces in here that could be respun for a high street audience, and they're not necessarily the ones you notice straight away. There are some incredible and very plain bustier dresses, shape of which is amazing.
So
They've
beautiful.
got pockets. They're perfect.
Well, even these kind of shapes with the cutout just kind of just above the navel,
So
you can
amazing.
imagine that.
You have to look really hard at the look and deconstruct it. And once you start to pull the pieces apart, you can see how it could work on the high street.
Did you guys see the showroom of this? Because I haven't seen it or touched it.
No,
so
I haven't
is
touched
it even more
it's
amazing?
really amazing.
Yeah,
You
it's
did
really
it recently, both
amazing.
of you.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about it up close.
There's just so much going on.
It's
I mean, it's sort of bristling. Those bra tops are bristling with bugle beads and crystals and kind of fringing almost made out of beads as well. The textures, the wool on the sort of sportswear pieces is just really kind of sumptuous. It's very thick, but then in the more sort of sinuous dresses, it's just amazing. The fabrication is incredible.
And the colours are so vivid and just like sludge versus vivid. It just works so well. And the bags and the shoes I think are really important here, because obviously Prada bags and shoes every season, they're like the key. And they're brought into the theme of the season. All the bags have got like printed leather with those face murals and beading. So it's not like they're elbowed in. It's not like some brands where it's just like, right, everyone has to carry a bag and it's just going to be boring. Like most of them are completely different. And the shoes are, slightly awkward. They're like Teva sandals with huge bits of like beading and
they're
gems.
made of rubber. They're like big rubbery stompy things. They're great.
Yeah, they're hideously beautiful. And it's just, I think it's just great.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the kind of the ethos of the collection, the play between sort of the obvious and that look again thing, because you all kind of agreed that from the first few looks you could see the statement that she was making here, and in some ways you could say this is a very obvious collection, it's very upfront in a sense, but then also just talking about what we've discussed then in terms of each look, you could almost have a 10-minute conversation about every look, because do you think that's part of the interest, is being able to do, Milan is very obvious as a city, I think, each look is very obvious. You look at Versace, you look at Gucci this season, it was obvious, but with this it feels kind of, I think that's a very complex idea that she's done really well, making something incredibly upfront, but also where there's such a story and such an intricacy to everything.
Definitely. I think she said backstage again, people sort of rushed up to her and said, "Is it wearable art?" And she went, "No." Because if you suggest something to her, she says, "No, it's never what you assume it is going to be." The collection that looked very American with all the cars on it. Is it Americana? No.
Everyone else.
I like
she
that.
wants you to think harder.
Is that a good thing in fashion? Do you think we're missing that? Is everyone else kind of not letting us think as much as we'd like to? In some ways it feels like everything's becoming a bit simpler.
I think we can think as hard as we want about things that we like or don't like. I think everything is rewarding in a way. I just think with Prada there's such an obvious invitation to do that, and that's why she has this sort of terribly high caliber intellectual customer, and why fashion people in particular really like the label.
Let's talk about something which was perhaps less intellectual. What were our thoughts on Versace?
Do we really have to do this?
Yeah, it was amazing.
I liked that they
was
played the
amazing.
Versace song. That was really great.
Can you sing the Versace song?
Versace.
That was amazing. What did we like about this collection? Is it just because it was pure Versace?
I don't think it was pure Versace.
Do you not? Talk to me about that.
Obviously there was a lot of Versace in there, but it felt much lighter. And there was a bit of day wear, I think.
Yeah. It felt kind of Versace.
Yeah, it did, because it had that kind of girlish edge rather than being quite so fierce.
Yeah.
Looser and lighter.
Were we impressed by it? Is it nice to see someone who just, we were talking about Prada kind of not caring, the Prada girl not caring this season. Donatella's almost the Prada girl in that sense, and she never cares. She's just doing her own thing.
I think she cares. I think she cares about us.
I
think
so
she
agree
wants
with
us
you.
to look like that.
Do you think she genuinely thinks we'd all
I think
look
she
better?
cares.
She
and tries hard.
genuinely.
Who are the women that still want to dress like this though? Do you think because we've talked so much about Prada's intellectual customer, women not wanting to be gazed upon, women buying their own clothes and dressing for themselves, and this is the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite easy to get wrapped up in this idea that women do shop for themselves now, and maybe that's quite a fashion thing, and it's become quite popular because of people like Celine and Stella to say that.
Yeah.
But do you think your average woman, your average shopper, whether she buys high fashion or not, do you think she still wants to look attractive to a man?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's still dressing for yourself in a way.
Well, hold on. I mean, for some women, attractive doesn't mean over sexy, but it means one thing. I mean, it's
some
the
women
meaning
it
you give
does.
to the world.
Yeah.
I think there are plenty of women who think that this is sexy.
This is sexy, yeah.
But are they dressing for a man?
And they would probably hate. But women also dress a lot for each other.
Yeah.
I mean, even women that want to look very sexy, they dress a lot for each other. I mean, there are very few women that dress for themselves. But that's, again, it's not something to judge upon. But I think there are many more women that want to look Versace sexy than what I think Prada sexy is. Many more. I mean, or Gucci sexy, or
is there a certain
Cavalli
accessibility
sexy
to that though? Because it's not lofty, it's not intellectual. You can look at that and instantly understand the appeal.
Yeah. But I think actually the look that we've got on the screen, the skirt with the floral blouse, that's not scary sexy.
No.
That's pretty. It's very accessible. It's not that Versace, which is why I say it felt like she had almost done the same thing as Prada, which is like, this is what you think I'm going to give you. There was a t-shirt in there.
Yeah. Alex Frew made an interesting point on the panel yesterday though, where he said it's almost pointless with Versace her doing anything that feels un-Versace, because no matter how nice it is, a shopper that likes lovely clothes and would buy Celine or Mary Conchonzi would never buy something, no matter how beautiful it was, because it had a Versace label in it, which I thought was really interesting, because we were talking about people buying things just because they had labels in. And the kind of flip to that is avoiding things because they have labels in. So presuming you would never, I would never go into a Versace shop just because I presume I don't like Versace, when actually looking at some of the stuff here, there's stuff that I would probably buy if it had another brand's label on it.
I think one of the things that Versace is doing really well at the moment is taking the kind of, we were talking about streetwear in terms of New York shows yesterday, is taking those sort of streetwear ticks and working them into its own sort of language. So when we did a re-see of this as well, and they had brilliant like black leather high tops with a big Medusa head on the front. Like they're fantastic, and people would buy them. Not necessarily a Versace customer either. Like I think that's actually quite, it's kind of broadening things out a bit. And we were talking about wit yesterday as well, and I think maybe it's more of an obvious humour here, but there's still, that person who likes the wit of Marc Jacobs has a laugh with a Versace item as well.
Well, I think there's something true about what you just said. Some people might want to like that dress, but they don't want it to be Versace. Why? It's because it had become the nouveau riche brand, and that was one of the reasons why they made money at a certain point. And so people that are beyond that, they just don't want to look like that, So there is something attached very much to Versace, and I would probably say Cavalli in the lower level. With that, so I think he made a good point, and I mean I've never been in a Versace store either, because it's really not my style. But and I probably wouldn't wear a Medusa because I don't like in any brand, the symbol too visible. But if I had a beautiful white leather jacket and it was Versace, I wouldn't mind. But there is some self-assurance about what I want to wear.
It's like why people buy Prada, often I don't actually think it is purely just because they like the piece. It's because there's something about, it's that aspirational thing. It's buying into this idea of being an intellectual shopper.
But you want to show that. Why you're not that proud about this, because this has been a little bit over sexy or over nouveau riche, and that's what people don't want to show they are.
And it's a shame if you discredit an entire label based on a preconceived idea that you have of it. It's like we were saying, heritage can be 30 years. Within that 30 years, it develops, it changes. So I think I mean, again, I personally probably wouldn't think, you know, I need an outfit, where am I going to go? I'll go to the nearest Versace store. That wouldn't come to mind. But equally, if I walked past a store and saw something great in the window, I wouldn't think, oh dear God, no, because of the label that's sewn into it. I think you have to keep an open mind, because labels will keep changing.
Yeah, well, but there's also a responsibility. I mean, a company does work on the brand, and you position the brand in a certain way, and that's why sometimes it's very dangerous to choose someone to be your face, or somewhere to go, or a style of a season, because then you attach something to you, you know. And if you think all brands have some branding attached to them, and then you choose to like it or not, because if it weren't like that, why would I buy, I don't know, riding boots at Hermes or Prada or Gucci when they're more or less the same price, they look more or less the same? You buy one or the other because you like the lifestyle of that brand more, you recognize yourself more. So honestly, in a way, I see from your point of view what you say, but from the business point of view, it's very important that you belong to a certain category or cluster, because otherwise people, you know, I mean, I honestly, at this point in my life, I choose products because I like them, I can afford them or not, whatever. But people choose brands because they're lifestyle. That's why.
People also, even I think we're guilty of this in fashion. It's not just about the shopper. Like, we pay more attention to what is on a Prada runway than we do on what's on another runway. And like Lisa Armstrong made this point yesterday. She was like, you know, Christopher Kane can kind of put out anything and we will take more notice of it because it's Christopher Kane. And there were some dresses that he put in his show that if they'd have been on an urgent runway, everyone would have gone, nice dress. But with Christopher Kane, they're like, oh, what does this mean? And they look slightly closer.
You're saying exactly what I just said. And apart from what I think about Christopher Kane,
Do you like Christopher Kane?
I mean, I think it's good, but no, I don't get all the hype around it. Because
of
those dresses, I think a little bit. But that's the lack that some designers have. First of all, they have some talents, but also they were at the right place at the right time, and the right editor you know, rich gazillionaire wanted to push them. And then there are others that are maybe more talented in a pure technical point of view, or that I would like more, that remain obscure all their life. But again, you know, it's about branding, about how much money you put behind, and people like you can make or kill a designer. And I have nothing against Christopher Kane. I think he's very good. But I think the hype behind him, it's more than needed.
Hype can be dangerous, I think. Really dangerous.
Yeah,
very much.
Talk to me about that.
Because I think you have to remember, I mean, the reason why I got into fashion is that I like the people element. I like the fact that this is somebody who, you know, from when they were 5, 10, whatever, has been sketching, has been talking to their granny about fabrics. You know, this is somebody's life and business and individual investment. And I think you do have a responsibility as a fashion writer, as an editor, especially when you're at the more senior end of the spectrum. You have to remember the human element involved in that. You can't just look at it as 25 dresses that you can just rip to shreds. I think you do have to remember the effect that you can have on somebody's career long term.
But Milan, I think that's what I find really interesting about it, and it's kind of its strength and its weakness. It doesn't feel like a very human fashion city. I don't think it feels like there's much love or personality or individuality in those, because it doesn't feel like the designers have poured themselves into them in the way that I don't think you get that in New York either, but you definitely get it in London, you definitely get it in Paris, despite the brands being just as big.
You know why? Because I think the problem of Milan today, and it's a big problem, is the old establishment. And that old establishment is not only the fact that Giorgio Armani and Miuccia Prada and whoever, they're not that young anymore, but it's also the whole establishment behind, you know, La Camera Nazionale and all of that. It's kept by the Zegnas and the Ferragamos and the Bertellis, and there's no space.
But do you not think
for the young kids? So there's no love, because everybody in Milan is complaining about that within the industry and without, and that kills completely the love and the passion, and there's no creativity going on, because people will not make it until the big establishment is there. You know, like Italy has been made on families that are the name of brands in all categories, and it's very much the familiar kind of thing. And I remember 20 years ago when Gap couldn't come into Italy because Benetton wouldn't allow it, and that happened. And today it's the same with the high fashion. So it's a big problem. If they don't kill that, they will not renew themselves.
And so this, sorry.
I wanted to mention Marnie at this point because I think it straddles both of those things that we've been talking about, in that there is a heritage there.
Yeah.
It has been around for a long time, but also I think there is that individual investment going on, because this collection in particular seemed so considered and so beautiful, and actually it is much more personal than a lot of those sort of big towering monolithic brands, and I think it is every season. And I think it has people who buy into the brand, not necessarily because of the lifestyle it promotes, because no one's that aware necessarily of what lifestyle it does promote.
She's not in the establishment.
Not at all.
Really
but they buy into it because they absolutely adore these clothes. And I think it has that sort of Prada edge of big name, you know exactly what you're getting, but also it feels very authentic and very genuine and quite sort of down to earth.
It feels complex as well, whilst being down to earth.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And actually the presentation of it, even though it was just, you know, an act of God or whatever, the fact that there was no music and at one point,
power cut at the show.
No music, and at one point almost no lighting, meant that there was just this incredible focus on what was going past your eyes. You know, you were forced to not be distracted by the spectacle. Maybe that is an argument for shows where you go the other way from the Moschino.
I think Marnie shows are always like that though, even with lights and music, regardless, you know, there is a lot going on in there, and it's beautiful, and you know, you're sort of distracted by the fact that the silhouette is perfect, but the print is really interesting, that, you know, something interesting and new is going on at the shoulders or the waist or the way it's been cut. I think there's so much there, and I think it sort of defies the Milan stereotype.
Rebecca, what were you going to say before, or have you forgotten?
I was going to say about Stella Jean.
Yeah, Stella Jean,
because she's younger, and she had kind of patronship from Mr. Armani, and it made everyone kind of sit up and take notice, and that is a tiny amount of what needs to be done, though. It's like, that's the start.
She showed in Pity as well, Pity, the last Pity, and that was amazing. And she's got a really interesting background, which I've now not going to be able to remember exactly. But
she's half Italian, half Haitian, I think.
Yeah, she's really exciting.
But I think we can discuss this in 6 months, because
well, it's exactly that's the start.
If they want to kill it, they will kill it. That's as powerful.
Well, is it not really kind of? Does it not give us optimism to see Mr. Armani, you know, lending his show space? I feel like Milan are trying. They're trying hard to kind of.
Yeah, but they don't have kind of the way that I guess London has Topshop, which comes in and scoops up these young designers and says, have some money, do this, do that. I mean, you have to do something for us in return, but that's business. And I don't think Italy has that.
And you often, I think, I'm obsessed with him, so I bring him up all the time, but you often see new talent kind of pushed out. So like Byrne, that happened, you know, where he was doing stuff that was really exciting and it got sort of the fashion press very excited, and then it just didn't work. And now it's the daughter, the granddaughter of the daughter, Gaia Ciottardi, sort of running the house. And you think that's such a shame when you have, I think he's one of the brightest young menswear talents, and his women's wear kind of got there in the end. And now he's gone.
His last women's wear season, autumn winter, was really great, and then it's just like, oh, okay, bye.
Such a shame.
That's very.
And that was it was a show that everyone got excited about, you know, especially at the menswear. And you're right, the last women's wear show was absolutely brilliant. And
it's surprising because it's like Trussardi. It's not a name that immediately jumps off a schedule to you.
Were there any surprises this season?
Many years ago.
Yeah. Was there any shows this season that actually we wouldn't expect to be great and were great?
I have the opposite. A show that I was looking forward to, and I was like, what's going on there? And it's Bottega Veneta.
Okay.
I don't know if you have an idea, but I thought that he did something he's not, and it didn't go down well for me. And I am a total fan of the, you know, consistency and I mean, I think brands have a mission as well, and this show is like nothing to do with Bottega Veneta. I don't understand.
I'm really surprised that you think that. I'm really surprised that you think that. I think you can see elements of past collections in most of these looks. So the shape, the colour palette, the sort of eclecticism, the we're not calling it tribal because that's terrible. The sort of global influence of the embellishment. I felt like it didn't feel like a departure. I liked it.
Do you not feel like I sometimes wonder with Bottega, you know, the success of that kind of 40s collection and how I think it's really interesting what you were saying before, Charlie, about kind of the 30-year heritage. That, I think, for a lot of people, because it was such a strong collection, so beautifully done, it's come to symbolise Bottega. And
but I think there's references collections before that.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking about 10 years of
but I think
Bottega
people get
ready
stuck
to wear.
on.
But I don't think I do, because as you know, I work with them and so I know the collections very well. And now we have a piece here in the middle which is very much referenced into Bottega. But there are some people like the big ruffles and the bows, it's so not Thomas Meyer. And I don't think it does it as well as what Thomas Meyer does. And I wasn't surprised that people even forget to mention it, and usually it's one of the highlights. And I don't know. It would be very interesting to see if it sells, but for me it was a little bit of a shock.
What was your guys' take on Bottega?
Well, I wasn't out for the show, but looking at the photos, I saw on catwalking, they obviously have the front shots and then they had some side shots, and you could see that it wasn't just the front, it was the back. It was, it was really a 3D design. I think it's really beautiful. I think there's obviously a lot of craftsmanship, fabric work. It's beautiful, it's elegant, and I think it's exciting and interesting. And I do think it's quite Bottega.
Yeah, I didn't think it was too much of a departure, really. I felt like there were a lot of references there. It was heavy.
Okay.
I mean, the black was intense. There was a lot of black. But I know was it yesterday's panel you were saying you felt that across the board?
It just felt like a very wintry spring summer.
Yeah, it did.
It was a very winter spring summer.
Yeah.
What do you think, Thomas? You said you didn't think that Thomas Meyer was playing to his strengths in a way. What do you think is what he does best?
Well, one of the things I like in his ready-to-wear, let's not talk about leather, is that it looks minimal or simple, and it's not at all. So it's very complex, like the shoulder on a jacket, the pleat on the back of a dress, the flying of the long skirt on a gown. I mean, there is all this workmanship and details that are just amazing. He's very focused. He's very,
such a perfectionist.
Yes. So when it becomes ruffles and when there is, it's as if like he wants us to show all of that in one collection. There's a little bit too much, and also usually I like his colors because he does black very well and those powdery colors, but then there is an orange there or a pink or and it was, I don't know.
Just wasn't
I think one of his strengths is the perfection in making it look simple, but then it's not at all. And I love that personally. And here it's not simple at all. But it's not, I'm not saying I like it or not, because that's subjective and who cares. I'm saying I don't know what took him. I don't know what happened there. I still think that it's quite distant.
What do you think he was kind of responding to?
I don't know. I was
customer
hoping to have it from you, but you totally disagreed with me, so I'm very frustrated.
It's good to have disagreement.
Yes, no, it's good. I mean, I totally respect you, and I will probably relook at it in a different way now. But yes, I do see references, but I also see. I mean, I don't know if we can do this because I don't know if people see that, but those two looks in the previous page, the last one and the first one, it's like two different brands for me. I just don't see, it's two different designers. But maybe, I don't know, maybe I can be completely wrong.
I'm sure you're not. Let's take a slightly different tack and talk a little bit about Jil Sander, because we've talked about simplicity and focus in terms of Bottega, and I think the collection we saw at Jil Sander's was focused to a point of being sort of very severe. And I really love that. It feels incredibly refreshing to see that in Milan, and it almost feels like the wrong place for the show. I don't know, what were your guys' thoughts on Jil Sander?
I think it's always felt like the odd one out, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So much so that when we were there and sort of tweeting stuff from the show and tweeting out the show report and things like that, we were getting responses that were like, OMG, I didn't know Jil Sander showed in Milan. And then, from people who just had sort of, I don't know, hadn't realised.
They thought she was in Paris? Or?
I think so,
perhaps. That's interesting.
But then it's kind of severe and not in the way that all of her collections specifically are and have been. So it looks like this very sort of, I guess, buttoned up, monochrome, quite sort of planate, you know, front and back, flat, cut, and it isn't. And actually there are looks at the end which are sort of covered in feathers. Which feels, you know, very, very different. But when you think back about the sort of classic Jil Sander trouser suit based on menswear, looks like it's cut very rigidly, falls around the body so softly, and forms its own kind of shape according to who wears it.
For me, there felt like something a little bit Marnie-ish about this in terms of the fact that, you know, they both kind of played with, you know, the pool sliders and that kind of sports wearing thing.
And the romance of it as well, I think, the sort of utilitarian romance, if that's a thing.
What did you think of Jil Sander, Charlie?
I'm going to be honest, it wasn't my favourite collection of recent years. But again, I mean, that look there, especially with the bra top and the pencil skirt, it was just so simple. And it comes back to that sort of female sexy versus male sexy. That to me, I think, is so seductive. You know, obviously most women aren't going to want to walk down the street. They wouldn't feel necessarily they have the confidence or the body or whatever, but there was a real, again, it felt as if it was coming from a woman. It made you want to wear it and feel feminine in the clothes.
For me, I was surprised that bra top came from Jil Sander.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah, you wouldn't look at that.
There was quite shocking.
Yeah. But I think what's interesting is you said you could tell that it felt like it came from a woman. And I think often when a female designer goes into a house that used to be sort of where she's taking over from a man, people often say that she's feminized it in some way. And I think what's interesting with Jil Sander is I think she did the opposite. She kind of made it severe. But I think you can still see that there's a new sensibility there.
You can still see the difference,
I think the difference between a woman designer for women or a man is that women tend to design a little bit what they are, and Phoebe Philo is a very good example of this, and I think Jil Sander as well. And that sometimes can be dangerous because then you don't move on, you know, which hopefully neither of these two or Miuccia have done. But I think that's where you see it's in the long term, you see it's a woman because it's the woman she has in mind, and usually it doesn't really jump from one to the other, whilst a man follows more the creativity or whatever, you know, and the simplicity or the fact that you do it for feeling well with yourself, it's very much of a woman's take on fashion.
It's interesting you say kind of move on, because that's what a comment someone made about Victoria Beckham on our New York panel. They said the reason it feels so exciting what she's doing is it feels like she stopped just kind of trying to replicate her, and that point you make about designing for yourself can stop a designer's creativity. I felt like this didn't feel like Jil Sander said, what do I want to wear? There was a sensuality to this.
That's sort of what I meant by this sort of biographizing that a lot of people do with Milan designers, in that I think it takes a remarkable creative scope, but also commercial sense to synthesize what you want to wear into something that more people will want to wear, because that Jil Sander traditional look is not that woman friendly, I think, on the surface. This is though, and I think that, you know, women wanted to wear Raf's clothes, but they want to wear these as well, and maybe these feel slightly less fairy tale.
And don't forget that it's not charity. I mean, they also still need to sell
of course,
clothes to some women, and so sometimes, you know, it's not true that designers don't care about the bottom line and never look into the figures. I mean, I know designers that look into the figures every day because they want to follow their creativity, but also, you know, keep their jobs. I mean, it's you can't just lose money. So maybe that's why there is a little bit of a change. I mean, camouflage in Jil Sander, that's quite incredible.
Absolutely.
That's very surprising.
And also, actually, in the accessories that we saw in the showroom, they're beautiful. They're really, really lovely. They're very sort of sturdy, strict shapes bags, but they're done in sort of almost like a silver foil cover, and the clutch bags are sort of really beautiful, really practical, and it just feels like a really perfect combination of her and what we want from her, which hasn't always been the case, I think, at that label.
Often it's felt like she's tried to ignore what people want from you to be.
Exactly, in a sort of kind of didactic, this is what I think you should have. This is not what you should want, you know, necessarily. This feels completely the other way around.
It's very interesting this idea, because I often presume that, and I like that I presume this, that female designers are more sympathetic to women, but I think this idea of the designer, a female designer designing for them, often it can make you less sympathetic, I think, to other women, because you have such a clear idea of what you want. And because I don't find Phoebe Philo's work remotely sympathetic or accessible to women. I think it's very I don't think she's an inclusive designer at all. And I wonder if that does come from that personal place, when actually if you're a man you've got this this looser, more sort of fantastical idea of womanhood.
You've got muses around you, and you notice other women. While if you're a woman, I mean, I'm not a designer, so I don't know if that's a rule, but I'm thinking Lorraine Scott. I mean, she designs pencil skirt that only someone as tall as her can wear. So I think if you're a woman, maybe you just design what you would want to wear. I don't think Miuccia does that much. She's more inclusive, and that's probably the experience and the talent, you know. But
it's the male gaze as well, isn't it? There's, I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing, but that sort of fetishizing of a female form that a lot of male designers do. They want to celebrate that. They want to do the boobs and the waist and the hips. Not all the time. Some of them.
Well,
whereas women are sort of like, I'll cover up that bit. I'm not getting those out. Like, you know, and so it's not necessarily reflective of a female physicality in the way it is when men are.
Here, I think the necklines really conveyed that. There was I think most of the dresses, there was a plunging neckline, but it wasn't.
It didn't reveal anything.
Exactly, it wasn't what you think of as a plunging neck. I mean, it was cut right down to sort of here, but it was a completely different way of doing that than you would see at, say, Cavalli.
But then, like the pointed neckline, like that was so difficult. That would be so difficult for someone who's not.
Can we go to that neckline, Neil?
A supermodel or really athletic.
It's difficult to wear.
Like that. That's going to be so hard to wear. I mean, obviously this is the catwalk version, so the commercial version will be different. But
logistically,
so many
tricky.
Women editors came out of there and were like, "Who can wear that? I can't wear that."
Yeah.
Become a challenge. You'll see the street style girls.
They have breasts to come to.
No, I can't wear that.
For flat,
I can.
I love that was my favourite dress.
You're not going to risk it.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go. Not on a panel,
very
probably.
Maybe not.
Could be a bit of a disaster. And we've talked a little bit about this idea of sort of sensuality and the male gaze, and on a few of our Milan panels, but also slightly before that, when we were looking at London, we talked about girlishness. And Emma Elwick-Bates talked about the return of sex, and she was like, sex is back, definitely. And a lot of our panelists have agreed with that. So maybe we should go to Gucci just because it's a big Milan one and we can't ignore it. But did you guys feel that? Did you feel that kind of sex was back a little bit this season? Everyone had stopped being so prudish. You're shaking your head.
I felt completely the opposite. I felt like autumn was really sexy. And spring was not. It was minimalism, sports, or a coat. And where was the sex? That's fine by me. I love a coat.
You're like, I like a coat and I don't like sex. What did you think about that, Rebecca?
I completely agree. I actually wrote a feature last week about how London was all about sex for autumn. And you expect it from other cities, but not London. And I think Gucci and Pucci did sex, and that's pretty much it. But that's kind of, their bread and butter.
I don't think this is that sexy. Which is
not
a diss.
I don't think
much
it's
more
sporty
elegant
or sexy at all.
I think it's sporty.
I don't. Well, it's not what I would say. It's not what I would term sexy. But I think looking at it,
I don't see the sport in there
just
because it looks. Yeah, exactly.
Stuff,
But I mean, I don't. Then again, what sex is for each of us. I think this is.
This is like if you have to draw
I think this is quite ugly, but that's again.
What were you going to say that you couldn't say?
Well, I was very sorry to see this because I think trying to go back to when it was sexy in the, I don't know, it's like, it's not relevant, it's old-fashioned.
Do you think it's try hard?
I hate saying this.
Do you think it's try hard?
It's trying hard, I don't know if I need to go back, go forward, is that me, it's not me. And again, I'm a little bit involved because I know the people
it doesn't feel confident.
And I was just shocked. It doesn't feel confident at all, and one thing that Frida is confident.
Yeah.
So it's like, am I going to try and take it back from Tom Ford? I don't know.
It felt uneasy, didn't it?
For me, this shouldn't have happened.
I think there is a confidence in doing a spring collection that is all dark and mostly metallic. I don't think she wasn't sort of convinced by her own designs. I think there was definitely a sort of this is my vision for spring. It was consistent, and it was consistently different from most things we'd seen and most things we saw afterwards.
Do you think it's very Tom Fordish? With those bra tops and.
I don't think it's Tom Fordish enough to say she doesn't know what she's doing.
Yeah. I think she definitely does know what she's doing, and I felt like her recent men's caused a bit of a kind of thing as well, where everyone was like, why has she gone so sporty? It felt like kind of shoehorning herself. But people were quite optimistic about it, whereas with this it felt like, to me, I think she's a very confident and capable designer, but it felt like she was shoehorning, and I can't quite work out where. It just didn't feel comfortable.
I think she's slightly hoisted by their customer base. That you really see at the show. There are a lot of of Chinese actresses and stars who we are not familiar with, head to toe Gucci, and that's where a lot of that buy comes from. And we've seen in previous collections she sort of used a bit of japonese or whatever in fastenings or in sort of embellishments, and I think there's an element of that in here as well, and it's speaking to perhaps different tastes.
What was your take on it, Rebecca? Because you said you didn't feel like it felt sort of comfortable particularly.
Well, I think the thing is, it's that whole thing about the biography of the designers. Like, she's just had a baby and everyone's reading so much into it. It's like, oh, it's sporty. She's trying to get back, reclaim her body, which is, the Gucci woman, it's all about the body. And it's just, I don't know, it's not a label that I'm particularly, it doesn't speak to me.
Really?
This collection, I don't know, there's a lot of work in it, there's a lot of layers. I didn't see it I didn't go to the catwalk, I didn't see the showroom, so I don't know, perhaps in person it's very different, your reading.
It's very delicate.
But
yeah, maybe up close.
From images, it looked kind of dated and weird, but...
To me too.
Was that our takeaway from this Milan, other than Prada, a bit of it feeling dated and weird? Because that's how you can always kind of sum up Milan, or am I being too harsh? It did feel like Milan was trying this season.
I think Milan felt really... I mean, I was there for just a few days, but in that time, I felt kind of disappointed by Milan.
It felt like this was a strong season in Milan. It felt like something was amiss. What was your take on Milan? What did you come away from Milan feeling, other than tired?
Very tired. I think dated and weird is possibly a step too far. I mean, how do people feel about Dolce?
Oh yeah, oh my god, I can't
Because that, I think, perhaps, it's a tricky point in the business, understandably, and like you say, there was, everybody automatically read in, again, the biography situation. It almost has too much context.
But I don't think that's what they were getting at with this at all.
Yeah.
People said the same with the men's. They were like, oh, all the coins.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's the way to go into these things. But I think, what they outlined was a story, and that's what they do every season, and they fit their Dolce-ness into the story, and it works. And when people say, oh, but they just do the same thing, it's like it's not the same thing.
No.
It's very similar signatures, but that's what people want, and that's what they expect, and that's why perhaps trends of the season are not necessarily borne out in a Dolce collection. That's not a problem for them at all.
I mean, I love Dolce.
I love it.
Yeah,
unashamedly, I love it. And I think it's really interesting that it's it's those signatures, but it's their signatures. They're not trying to reclaim the codes of the house, blah blah blah. It's what they love, and it's beautiful, and the workmanship is incredible. And I just think
it's very honest. It's very fun.
Yeah.
It's it's fun and glamorous and
There's
romantic.
an irony to us saying it's very honest, but I do agree.
Well, I know exactly, but
it's very consistent, I must say.
Yeah.
When people say it's always the same, I understand what they mean. They don't see it from close, and it's very consistent, and the spectacle looks a little bit the same. I thought the winter collection, the last one, I was here with you, I thought it was fantastic. I never loved Dolce Gabbana more. There is a lot from that collection in here. There are some shapes that are back, but what I respect, I'm not a Dolce Gabbana person. I mean, I like it, but I don't wear it. But what I respect is the consistency, and I think it's good to continue, being who you are, because that's what they are, and it's beautiful.
You get a sense that they're probably happy, 100% happy with every single look that they put out there.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, actually. Nothing ever feels tricky or try hard, does it?
No.
Try hard, especially, which is what I liked about this collection.
Although there were differences, the sort of fur bits, and I think it was ciré, I'm not quite sure, but the shiny bits as well. Those felt sort of new, they felt like new materials for them.
I think I want to go back to a point you made, Harriet. You said we shouldn't go into, we were talking about the coins and people presuming that was a reference to the tax gate, and you said we shouldn't go into a collection like that. Why do you think that? Because in London, I think people are quite happy to go in and
yeah, it really does my head in when people go in like that, though, because it automatically means you're going in with some pre-assumption on what this person has been thinking about and working on, and why on earth should their theories for a collection have anything to do with their personal life or what's been going on.
Do you not think
around
inherently design? Charlie was saying it's a whole person's life, their design. Before you talking about the reason.
I think it's different with brands, different with different designers. You know, some really do put their life story into things. Those, I would say, on the whole, are not the designers that I like particularly. I think, you know, it's the same as taking a sort of historicist view on books as well. You know, is everything Emily Bronte wrote to do with her lying on a sofa having tuberculosis? No, I don't think it is.
So
she wouldn't write about Moscow. You see what I mean? There's always something about
there's
where you
context.
come from. You know,
there's
I mean,
definitely
if you're
context.
Indian, there will be an Indian. And I think that there is a lot of who they are in this, probably more.
But is it when we
Dolce
get really
Gabbana.
simplistic, when we go into a collection going,
Coins.
she's just had babies?
I think it's completely simplistic, and I think it's completely nonsense. And when you talk to the designer, they say whatever.
Exactly.
Or when they themselves, they have to put some references in their press releases, and sometimes it makes me laugh. But I mean, you cannot deny that they are Italian, and there is a lot of history there. I mean,
of course.
That black dress in the middle, which is spectacular, by the way, it's not the first time we see it at Dolce Gabbana. It could be a new fabric, but that thing can only be Dolce Gabbana.
I don't
but
mean
for
that.
me, it's not a minus. For me, it's a plus. You know, I know what if I'm a Dolce Gabbana woman, I know that I will always find that, and that dress is very beautiful.
But this collection, we can say it's about Italy, but I think what you say is it's not as simplistic as, you know, something that's happened to them in the 6 months.
That's exactly what I mean.
Exactly.
You know, the context is them, Sicily, Italy, and I think they were talking about this sort of nymph who'd fallen asleep in some ruins. That was all plain to see, and it was really lovely. What I found annoying is that it's so reductive to come out of that show and say, there were coins, therefore it's about tax.
I agree
and
with
you
you
skate over all the rest of how brilliantly this collection's been put together, perhaps in difficult circumstances, you know?
Yeah.
And then also you've got to be aware that they're aware. You know, they know if they put a collection littered with gold coins, they know what the natural assumption is going to be.
So maybe they're just having fun.
They're prepared for that.
But also coins is history, is archaeology. It's
part
of their heritage.
They fitted into the story they were telling, I think, way more than any assumption of either Dolce or Gabbana saying, well, let's make them laugh with these coins. I think it was genuinely, there was a sort of archaeological feel, there was a column print, there was, you know, foraged or found coins. There were pottery bits. It was like, you know, the muse falls asleep on the top of the surface and they dig down into something more sort of pastoral or chthonic. That's what this collection was about. It wasn't about a tax dodge.
Though that hung in the air, I imagine it. There wasn't a streaker at this one.
It didn't even occur to me, to be honest.
Did it not?
No, me neither.
I feel so stupid.
Exactly.
But I mean...
And then I read all the tax stuff and I thought, really?
What?
That's why I feel so strongly about it. It seemed to come out of nowhere. It felt like really lazy journalism.
Well, I mean, if you read in Italian, it was all over the press and all over the TVs. A lot there. So probably the Italian press picked it up more because... And also, you know, they closed all the stores in Milan for 2 days, and I think they whacked the dog. I mean, they did something very stupid about writing a whole page in very bad English, by the way, in the press. Whatever.
I think
so
we got
for those that didn't notice, now they knew. But that's a communication problem. But so that's probably why, you know, it was so prominent that they're like, oh, there must be something about that.
But that's hype again in a different way, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's hype again,
So it would be nice to hear it from them.
Yeah.
You know, and see their take on that.
What's our takeaway from Milan then? Too much hype, too much sex. Well, no sex, no good sex.
No sex, no hype, I thought.
No sex, no hype. Do we all agree with that?
But Britney at Prada.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway.
Maybe that was her trying to get Milan to step it up. She was like, you better work.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I think it lacks a little bit of creativity because this can be very beautiful, but it doesn't reinvent fashion, while I think Miuccia does. And that's my take of Milan. I mean, I would like to see something new.
Everyone's agreeing there. Everyone's like, come on, Milan, work, bitch. This is good.
I mean, this is Milan. It's been the capital of fashion for many years, and it's losing it completely, and that's really a pity, you know.
A somber note to end a roundup, but it was a great discussion. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.